but I like to hit speaker view so that you'll have a better view of the person who's speaking. And of course you can put it on gallery if you like, but I do prefer to do speaker view when someone as amazing as the Drs. Han and Dr. Marks and Rear Admiral Araujo are here. So that's everything for the beginning. If you have any other questions, you can put them in the chat. We will share both the recording and the slides with you afterwards, which are really just a list of resources for you to have on hand. So let's get started. A little bit about Vaccinate Your Family. We, again, have been here 30 years. We have an amazing board of directors, including the wonderful co-founder, Rosalind Carter, former First Lady. She's the president of our board. Her other co-founder was Betty Bumpers, who, my favorite person in the world. She did pass away a few years ago, but we are committed to ensuring that her vision for a vaccinated world comes to be. Our website is officially certified by the World Health Organization as a certified site, meaning that it is scientifically accurate. We are one of a handful of organizational websites that have that certification, so we're very proud of that. We really do welcome you to come back to our website again and again. We are constantly loading it with new information. We have a COVID section. Of course, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be unveiling a bigger section as EUAs are discussed, and hopefully we'll have approval of vaccines. So we do welcome you to our website. We also are very active on social media. We have about 200,000 followers, and they are incredibly engaged on the issue of vaccines. Through our social media, we have met amazing other partners as well who are really making a difference out there in the world to make sure that science is heard. And so we do encourage you to also visit our sites. This specific section of our website really talks about the tough questions that people have. We're currently culling a list of Q&As actually on COVID as well. And so we'll be sharing those with partners, but also on our website. And this is a list of resources. We're constantly working on new ones. And we know that you all are patient advocates and you have a lot on your plates. We're really excited that people are finally coming to understand that people with comorbid conditions are at higher risk of vaccine preventable diseases in general. I think that the only shining light of the COVID nightmare has been that people understand A, herd immunity, and B, that if I have a certain health condition, I am at higher risk of having an adverse event from a vaccine preventable disease. So we do have quite a few materials out there. We have a lot of graphics. We would love for you to share them. Anything you need, you just let us know and we'd be happy to co-brand or work on specific areas. We are here to help you. This is what we do every day and we want to help make your lives easier. So that's everything for Vaccinate Your Family. I just wanted to share a couple of slides. Again, these are our guests for today. And they have a great website as well, and they are constantly, and I could tell you, I keep getting updates all week long, putting in new resources. So we would urge you to go to their resource section and take a look. These are their newer resources that were just added, Vaccine Development 101. I think that one of the folks that are speaking today will be referring to this, but I'm going to actually pull it from the slide so you can see them in full screen. However, these again will be shared with you. And so I won't go into detail, but I will move forward and invite our guests. So Dr. Han, I want to just present you first. You were sworn in as the 24th Commissioner of the Food and Drug on December 2019. I bet that seems like a world away now. And you're a physician, a scientist, a healthcare leader with an extensive background in patient care, academic research, and executive leadership. Dr. Han is a dedicated clinician, and he trained in both medical oncology and radiation oncology. In his previous leadership roles, he was always carefully balanced executive management with clinical time to continue to serve both oncology patients, and that is really his true passion. He specializes in treating both lung cancer and sarcoma. I think for those of you on the call, you can see that he has quite a lot of insight to offer you. So again, Dr. Han and our other guests, thank you for joining us, and I will leave it up to you.
Well, thank you, Amy, and thank you to everyone who's on the call today, and particularly Vaccinate Your Family. we've become really great partners during this time and share some very common goals regarding vaccination and the importance to public health. So thank you very much for your incredible dedication. I'm looking forward to the discussion and to having our team answer questions. This is obviously timely given the recent news of Pfizer's submission of an emergency use authorization application to the FDA last week. And I am pleased to be joined today by Dr. Peter Marks, who's the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. We call it CBER, and that's the center that's in charge of reviewing and authorizing any vaccine application that FDA gets in-house. And Rear Admiral Charday Araujo, who's Dr. Araujo is our Associate Commissioner for Minority Health, and just a terrific person and advocate, and has been in this public health space for some time, working tirelessly on behalf of the American people. Thank all of you for all of your work during this incredibly challenging time. While we organize this call to update patient advocacy groups about our work at FDA, it's incredibly helpful for us to hear directly from patients about the challenges that you're facing in response to this pandemic. And again, we look forward to hearing that and also to answering any questions you have. Obviously, forefront of our mind are patients with underlying conditions as we tackle this enormous challenge. And as an agency, we have been and continue to be focused on using science and data to protect and promote the health and safety of the American public. And we've been engaged in this battle against the COVID-19 pandemic for nearly 9 months now. And it has been a painful period, as I think all of us would agree, one that has caused our families and communities to change how we live. It's also triggered significant economic and social disruption. And worst of all, it's led to many personal tragedies. At the FDA, we've been working around the clock to advance a far-reaching response to COVID-19, and we put all of our resources and tools to work in our search for solutions. As we've gone about looking for answers and reaching sound decisions based upon science and data, just wanted to point out that FDA's North Star has always been and will always be the application of that rigorous science and solid data. And this foundation has enabled us to address testing supply shortages, expand increases in personal protective equipment, ventilators, other medical devices, counter the sale of fraudulent products, which we've seen, unfortunately, during this pandemic, and ensure continued access to necessary medical products, both COVID-related and non-COVID related. And then, of course, which we're all interested at this point, very much top of mind, is support the development of therapeutic products and vaccines. Our mission, as you know, remains to protect and promote the public health. And it just makes sense that FDA is uniquely prepared to respond to this kind of public health emergency. After the terrorist attacks of 9/11, Congress created the Emergency Use Authorization, which is an authority that we have that's designed to ensure that potentially life-saving medical products could be available to people in medical need before they had been fully studied to the same degree as we would approved products. And we've used the EUA process, Emergency Use Authorization, to strengthen our response. We've granted more than 300 of these authorizations, and some to authorize multiple devices, which totals more than 600 authorized products. And to just put this into context, this is 10 times the amount of EUAs, authorizations, that we've issued for all previous public health emergencies combined. And when we're asked to consider an emergency use authorization for a vaccine, we will carefully consider the risks and the benefits. Because, of course, unlike a therapeutic, a vaccine is given to those who are not yet ill with COVID-19, and so many people are healthy. It does influence the assessment of the risk and benefit of a vaccine in the application, and Dr. Marks and Dr. Araujo will spend some time talking about it. We are committed to being as transparent as possible about the scientific basis for EUAs. You may have seen a statement that we issued last week regarding our commitment to transparency around this. We believe that commitment to transparency will bolster public confidence in our review process, but ultimately in those authorized products. So our commitment around transparency will both be around the process that we have, but also regarding the criteria that we're going to use to make an authorization or approval about any medical product. The other thing that's really important to us is our efforts, and Rear Admiral Araujo will talk about this, to increase the diversity of participants in clinical trials. And while this has been a focus for us for a number of years, it is particularly important for COVID-19 because we know that there are certain segments of the population that have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And it is critically important that any recommendation we make regarding a medical product be for all Americans and all segments of our society. So that diversity in patient populations in clinical trials in particular will help us ensure a more complete analysis and understanding of differences in response, and make sure that products we approve are safe and effective for everyone. So as we move closer to all these possibilities, and particularly as we look at these vaccines, it's really important to keep in mind some important principles that we hold near and dear to our heart. First of all, while we desire the successful and speedy development of products, we cannot and we will not shortcut the essential review our scientists must undertake to ensure the safety and effectiveness of any treatment or vaccine. And speed is important, but also we need to make sure that our great and incredibly skilled career scientists have the time that they need to review the products and the applications so we can ensure that they meet the agency's rigorous standards for safety, accuracy, and effectiveness. Let me make it clear to everyone on the call today. We will not authorize or approve any COVID-19 vaccine until our career scientists have poured through the data and made sure that such an approval or authorization meets our rigorous standards. And a second related point about why this is so important is because it is essential. The public must have full trust in the FDA's review process and complete confidence in whatever products we approve or authorize. This confidence is particularly important when we begin a national vaccine campaign, which hopefully will happen soon. We will not approve or authorize any vaccine that we would not want to also give to our families. And each of you can play an important role in this regard. Your understanding of our process, the data and criteria we're going to use, how it can help support innovation, and how the FDA applies the best science and data to make well-informed decisions can go a long way to helping boost public understanding and confidence in our processes and the products we authorize or approve. I hope we can count on your support. From our vantage, the FDA will continue to apply its energy, resourcefulness, and scientific rigor to address these ongoing challenges because we all want to return to a more normal, healthier daily life. And now I'd like to turn the conversation over to Dr. Peter Marks, Director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. I'd just like to start by thanking Dr. Marks for his incredible leadership during this time. It hasn't been easy. He has done so with integrity and a commitment to science and data that is unparalleled. Dr. Marks.
So thanks very much, Commissioner Hahn. So what I thought I'd do is just tell you about what kind of goes from here now that we have the emergency use authorization request. And I'll just try to take a couple minutes and tell you what's kind of going on right now. So our scientists, physicians are looking at the data that's been submitted to us. It's literally thousands of pages of information. They are going to spend a very busy Thanksgiving working through information on manufacturing, information on reports of inspections of various aspects of the process that we have, as well as the clinical data on the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. Ultimately, all of that will be put together in reviews and will be written up. We'll be putting up together a briefing document for our vaccines and biologics related advisory committee. That committee, also abbreviated VRPAC. The VRPAC will meet on December 10th, and they will review the information that will be presented to it that will have come from our reviews. They'll review the information given by the company, and they'll have a discussion that will be public. You'll be able to tune in via, I think it'll be streamed live on Twitter and Facebook, as well as an Adobe connection. You'll be able to watch the discussion. and there'll be some vote on the safety and efficacy of that product. And then if everything goes well, sometime shortly thereafter, within a matter of weeks, or we will have an emergency use authorization approved. And so that's an exciting thing, I think, in the world of vaccines, that we're working towards that. Obviously, we have to work through carefully, because our goal here is to have everything we do engender confidence in the ultimate vaccine. Part of the thing that's been raised here is that there's been some concerns raised about authorizing a vaccine under these emergency use provisions. I think it's important to understand a little bit about how we've approached this. Normally, vaccines that we take are approved as biologics products, and they are approved with a biologics license that we issue after we get in safety and efficacy data from large, well-controlled randomized trials that are usually involve thousands of people and follow-up of patients over the course of anything from 6 months to a few years. Now, the emergency use authorization standard is a much lower standard, and it was done so intentionally because for therapeutic products, for somebody who has a disease that couldn't be treated by any other means, in an emergency like a terrorist attack or a natural disaster, or in the case of COVID-19, you might, if you had a disease, be willing to take a certain amount of risk of uncertainty about whether a product was truly effective. That lower standard, which says that a product may be effective and the known and potential benefits must outweigh the known and potential risks, that's kind of the floor of where we're starting from. But for vaccines, we're actually going to be using a standard for how we judge these that's much more like what we would normally use for a vaccine, like the flu shot you get or the pneumococcal vaccine you get. And that is that the data we'll be using will come from these large, well-controlled randomized trials. And you've all heard about these now. These are these large 30 to 44,000 patient randomized clinical trials that will be submitted to us. And they will be evaluated much in the same way. We'll be looking at much of the same data that we would look at if these were a biologics license. Now, we can't look at every last bit of this the same way we would for a biologics license application, but the key elements will be similar. And anything that we give an emergency use authorization to will have demonstrated clear and compelling evidence that it is safe and effective, because whatever comes through the process has to be something that we feel comfortable taking, our families can be comfortable taking, all of us who are hearing my voice should be comfortable taking. So that's what we're working towards here. We're trying to do it in a very transparent manner. We will make up for some of the one thing I should just say that we will make up for some of the lack of the longer term follow-up by having very good safety surveillance. And that's something that we're working with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention very closely with. We'll have both safety reporting from people who have gotten the vaccine, as well as we have safety systems that we can use that look at people's interactions with the healthcare system to pick out whether there are safety signals that have come up with the vaccine. So we will do everything we can here to make sure that when this is deployed, it is a safe and effective vaccine that people can trust. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Marks. I'd now like to introduce Rear Admiral Charday Arojo, our Associate Commissioner for Minority Health and the Director of our Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. Rear Admiral.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn, and good afternoon, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate. I just want to start by, again, thanking all of you and your organizations and the hard work that you're doing, your commitment and your leadership during this challenging time as COVID-19 continues to impact all of us especially our racial and ethnic minority communities, our tribal communities, and other diverse groups. And I was looking at all of the different organizations as you were chatting in your association names, and I've had the privilege and have been fortunate to really work with many of your organizations. And just to provide a little more background about the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity, we work to protect and promote the health of diverse populations by focusing our efforts on research and outreach and communication that works towards addressing health disparities. Of course, we work broadly across our agency with all of our centers and offices, as well as with both public and private sector stakeholders. And as Dr. Han mentioned, one of our key priority areas is continuing to work to advance diverse participation in clinical trials. And in response to these efforts, the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity, we've developed an ongoing multimedia public education and outreach campaign that really works to address some of the barriers preventing diverse groups from participating in clinical trials through a variety of culturally and linguistically competent strategies, tools, and resources. And this is a campaign that's been ongoing for a number of years, and it includes educational materials in multiple languages. We have a dedicated webpage with public service announcements and videos. We engage in social media outreach, and we also have ongoing stakeholder collaborations and partnerships. And as you can imagine, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have really worked to increase amplification of our clinical trial diversity messages. We have provided weekly COVID-19 communications to our stakeholders, as well as developing and translating materials to help consumers make informed decisions about their health. And Amy highlighted earlier with the slide some of our ongoing outreach and communication activities. And I just want to spend a moment highlighting some of those. We held a listening session early on in the pandemic with our diverse health professional organizations so that we could really learn about the gaps and needs of our racial and ethnic minority communities and other diverse communities, as well as so that we could share information on FDA's COVID-19 activities. And we have, of course, been supporting efforts in collaboration with our FDA centers and offices to provide the most current and accurate COVID-19 information to the diverse communities that we serve, as well as our public overall. Our agency's COVID-19 webpage has been translated into Spanish. We also have our FDA COVID-19 frequently asked questions, as well as a COVID-19 multilingual resources webpage. And this webpage features a growing collection of educational materials in Spanish and simplified Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, among a number of other languages. And this information is really important because it provides details on pertinent COVID-19 topics, such as social distancing, diagnostic testing, vaccine development, like we're talking about today, fraudulent medical products, blood and plasma donation, as well as food safety. And really to have efforts to continue to advance our outreach and communication, we have a number of toolkits that we've developed as well. One of those is our COVID-19 bilingual social media toolkit, and it features consumer-friendly messages and culturally appropriate graphics. And it really offers a toolkit that our stakeholders can use and have readily available that they can share messages and consistent messages with their community. We also have materials to support our healthcare professionals. And for example, that includes our patient outreach toolkit. And this is so that health professionals can share COVID-19 health information with their patients and with others in their community. So we are really working closely across our agency to support all of our agency efforts in response to this pandemic. We know, of course, that COVID-19 requires all of us to work very closely together, and I really value your time and your input today so that we can continue to strengthen our response efforts. And I look forward to continuing to work with all of you, all of our stakeholders, as we continue to respond to the pandemic, as well as to amplify communications to the patients and to the public overall. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you so very much. We're going to get right on to some questions. Again, I had some folks send some in, so I'm going to call out your name. If you don't end up unmuting yourself, you must unmute yourself to speak. If you don't unmute yourself, then I will ask the question for you. And Dr. Han, do you want to suggest who on your team should answer each question?
Yeah, that'd be great. Be happy to.
Terrific. Okay, so the first question is going to come from Diana Clynes from the American Association of Kidney Patients.
Hi, my name's Diana Clynes. I'm the Executive Director for AAKP, and I've actually got two questions. I'll pose them separately. First question is, what will the protocol be for engaging America's chronic kidney disease and dialysis patients and their families and caregivers?
Do you want to answer the second one, or do you want to go in sequence, Diana?
It's completely up to you.
So Peter, you might want to address the scientific and clinical aspects to that, and then Dr. Araujo in terms of stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, so I think, the engagement there, we are working to make sure, and there'll be a discussion at the advisory committee meeting of various different populations and who would be potentially eligible for vaccination, and clearly this is an area many of those individuals would potentially fall into this high risk category. So I would assume that this will be part of what will be the engagement. Won't be just FDA, but will also be CDC that will engage with those communities, including through discussion probably at the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practice about those who are most in need of getting the vaccines in the first wave. But your point's well taken that there will probably also be additional work done in various populations to look at the safety in specific populations. In this case, I don't think there's any particular concern with this first wave of vaccines in patients who are on dialysis or who have kidney issues, but it's a great point to bring up.
And Sharday, I don't know if you want to talk about stakeholder engagement, because it probably not just for kidney patients, but others as well.
Yeah, what we would basically continue to do is activities like the one today, where we can continue to amplify our communications to all of our stakeholders, and as well as when we have information that's available and new information that's available. Amy highlighted some of that earlier, and I highlighted some of the communications that we have. We will work to continue to amplify those communications to all of our stakeholders, from the weekly emails and listserv messages that we've been providing, as well as really doing targeted social media outreach and engagement, including speaking engagements like the one today, to highlight all of these tools and resources for all of our stakeholders.
Thank you.
Great.
Diana?
Thank you. As the oldest and largest kidney patient organization in the U.S., we definitely stand ready to assist in all educational, campaigns related to the vaccination. And final question: will the vaccine be recommended for immunosuppressed kidney transplant recipients?
Dr. Marks, I think that's to you. I got that one. Yeah. So I'm going to suspect, again, this will be a discussion, but very likely. Although we will have to study the vaccine responses more in immunosuppressed individuals, given the higher risk that those individuals are. Again, I don't want to presuppose anything, but I would be suspecting that that's a group that we might see recommendations for sooner rather than later. But again, that's a group that I know that there will be additional study on, so that we can get better estimates of vaccine effectiveness. That doesn't mean that necessarily we won't recommend giving it in a first wave, but we'll get better efficacy data on those populations when they're specifically studied.
And I would just also mention that yesterday the ACIP met, and they were talking again about the phases of recommendations. And so a lot of terrific conversation ensued during that for phase 1 through phase 3, 4. And again, they will be meeting as soon as the EUA is put out by the FDA. And so I would really say keep an eye on that, because they're thinking about a lot of issues that they don't really come to mind the moment you think, when you first think about the phases and then the nuances. So I would say keep an eye on the ACIP.
And Amy, I think it's really important to highlight that from yesterday. It's a really good point you're making. Their commitment to health equity was so welcome, and we can't state that enough.
Yeah, I agree. It's great people. And we're so lucky to have everyone that's working so hard on this COVID. I'm so grateful. It's like Thanksgiving every day. Okay, Silvia Yee from the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm just concerned about people with disabilities who don't necessarily fall in line with having an acknowledged comorbidity, let's say, that qualifies them for being earlier in priority, but who are have significant disabilities, who are living in the community with personal care assistance. I'm not sure how they fall in the prioritization of vaccination and how they would be able to reach vaccination centers given um, given the decrease in public transportation, given that they may not be able to drive themselves anywhere, and so forth. These are vulnerable individuals that are basically trapped in their homes at this moment.
Well, Sylvia, thank you for that question. I'm going to ask Crescenzio from our FDA to make sure that we, take your name, your organization, and pass that along to those who are responsible for the prioritization. Just to be clear, the CDC will work with the ACIP to talk about vaccine distribution as well as prioritization and which groups should be first in line to receive the vaccine. Your point is very well taken and should be considered into that decision making. It's also relevant for the Department of Health and Human Services and Operation Warp Speed, since they are setting up, at least initially, some of the distribution procedures along with Pfizer for their vaccine. So we'll be sure to pass that along.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Okay, the next person is Leslie Ritter from the National MS Society. Leslie, are you here?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you all for being here and for engaging in this dialogue with us. I did have a question around, and I think it's similar to one that Jamie Sullivan just put in the chat. Many of our organizations have registries or information that we have been collecting, as well as questions from our constituencies about questions they have around the vaccine. What is the best way to get that information to you? We want to be helpful, but we also don't want to overload you with information from the patient community. So any advice you have on how to submit that information would be great.
Dr. Araujo, Sade, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, you are definitely welcome to even reach out directly to my office, the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity, and we can make sure that we share the resource of how to reach us directly. And we're happy to receive that information and also communicate with our stakeholder engagement office as well at FDA to make sure that we're aware of that information and the work that you're doing.
And I will share, when I share the slides and the link to the video, I will include the way to reach to Dr. Araujo as well. Okay. Okay, Janice Gurney with Family Voices. Okay, Janice, I'm going to ask your question for you. What is the youngest age at which someone will be eligible for vaccine? How and when will the potential vaccines be tested for children and youth in general, including those with health conditions that make them high risk?
It's clearly a Dr. Marks question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question and the right one to be asking. So the current trials, the Pfizer trial enrolled some individuals down to age 12. I suspect that there'll be some discussion about whether there were enough individuals in that age range to allow vaccination of younger individuals. There may or may not be. But that being said, very rapidly now that we have these first trials completed, the vaccines are being studied. They're going to plan to be studied in what's essentially an age de-escalation trial. They'll study them in people first. They'll make sure they feel that there are enough people from 12 to 15 years of age who have been treated. Then they'll go down to 5 to 12, and then so on. And those trials will happen relatively soon. They will likely not rely on a clinical endpoint like the current trials, where they waited for people to actually get a certain number of cases of COVID-19. They'll look at the immunologic correlate of getting immunity, either antibodies or certain immune cells called T cells. So that's what will likely happen. I suspect those studies will start very, very soon, because obviously after the adult population is vaccinated, and obviously it would be ideally simultaneously, we will start to get children vaccinated, particularly children at risk. But ultimately, we all need to be vaccinated to stop this cycle of transmission.
Thanks, Dr. Marks. Okay, I have a question from Mitchell Warren, who is on the Adult Vaccine Access Coalition, which Vaccinate Your Family is also a steering committee member. Mitchell, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, thanks so much, Amy. And I'll just go ahead and go on camera too. Actually, it's a different AVAC. We're formerly the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition, but connected in all of this. And
oh, sorry. Okay.
Participate in the October 22nd meeting, and just great thanks to all of you at the FDA. I had a question, and with all the excitement of the 3 trials that we've heard about so far, as EUAs are reviewed and potentially granted and then approvals, I'd love to get a sense of the future of placebo control, both the placebo arms of the ongoing trials, where I think we still need data, as well as what might happen for the standard of prevention in next generation trials.
Mitchell, that's an excellent question. I mean, outstanding. And of course, we're all grappling with that. Dr. Marks, maybe you want to answer that?
So thanks very much. It's a great question. So what I can tell you is the thinking at this time, and there'll be obviously more discussion about this, will be that for the ongoing placebo-controlled trials, because many of the individuals on those trials will be people who would not be, even though they're on the trial, they would not be necessarily in the first wave of people you would vaccinate once a vaccine was available. So what may be happening here is that at the end of the trial, or at the end at this portion, they may be told what arm they were on of the trial, and then offered the ability to get vaccinated when vaccine is available. Pending that vaccination, they'll obviously continue to be followed as placebo patients, and obviously after they're vaccinated, they'll then cross over and be followed as a vaccinated patient. But we anticipate that given the large size of these trials, that at least for several thousand people, we'll have probably at least a good 4 to 6 months of follow-up, which granted it's not a year's of follow-up, but it will be placebo-controlled follow-up on in a reasonable number of individuals. Now, the larger question, and I don't have a perfect answer for this, is how are we going to move forward in future trials if truly we have these trials now that are having 95% effectiveness? How are we going to be able to do placebo-controlled trials in the future? Are they going to be trials that will be controlled with one of the existing vaccines? But that's something that will be, again, probably open for another discussion, potentially in a public venue in the future.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And Mitchell, can you restate your affiliation, because I was speaking over you?
No, not a problem. I mean, it is also AVAC. It originally was the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition, and we work across all of HIV prevention and vaccines generally. And I'll just say, this issue of comparator is obviously a hot topic with the FDA on HIV prevention. These are high quality problems, and I think we all look forward to figuring out how we deliver what we have, but still develop what comes next. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, Mitchell. Okay, Heather Sachs from the National Down Syndrome Congress, are you on the line? Okay, I'm going to move on. Angela Lello.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is Heather Sachs.
Go ahead.
I am on the line, but if you could ask the question, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Heather wanted to know, will people with intellectual and developmental disabilities be given priority in vaccine distribution plans? Are there steps national orgs can take to make sure that people with disabilities are given priority?
Again, an excellent question. It really goes back to what we said previously. The prioritization and the distribution are the responsibility of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as for Health and Human Services and Operation Warp Speed. we will certainly pass along the requests for input regarding persons with disabilities, and so that can be factored into the decision making moving forward. To our knowledge, and we've had ongoing discussions about this, no definitive recommendation has been made. Some of that will be dependent upon the data that Dr. Marks and his team review, but you're making an excellent point, and we should pass that along.
And I have another question from Autism Speaks that is the same concept of who is being prioritized. And so we will pass that along. I would really like to recommend that everyone on this call start watching the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices webcast. If you don't currently watch them, they are live feed. We would really love to hear you asking questions of ACIP during the public comment period. Excuse me, not asking questions, but making a public comment, writing your public comments in. I think they really need to hear from this broader group, you know, as we move forward on every vaccine. And so I would really recommend that you all do that. Okay, I'm going to go with Nick Kirchhoff from the Colorado Rare Action Network.
My questions have been answered, so thank you.
I thought so as well, but I thought I'd give you that opportunity. Okay, I have a question for Dr. Marks, and then I'm going to go over to the chat again. Dr. Marks, you said that the meeting is on December 10th, and then the timeline, I thought it was going to be the same day or a couple days later that we would know about the EUA, and I'm not sure if I misheard you today. Did you say it would be several weeks after December 10th?
No, what I said, it would be within the weeks after. It will be a matter of weeks. It could be from days to weeks. I can't give you an exact date that we're going to have an emergency use authorization issued, because we have to do it right. Obviously, we're going to be working to do it as quickly as we possibly can. And you may have heard in the media that it will be within a few days. It's possible it could be within days, but our goal is to make sure it's certainly within a few weeks.
Okay,
but again, we're aiming for the shorter period of time. I don't want to. I'm not trying to break news here. I'm just trying to tell you that the idea here is to have it happen within a few days to a few weeks. We just can't give you an exact date because that obviously depends on the complexities of the data that we have to look through.
So we have time to prepare, but in the meantime, we'll have hope that a vaccine will come soon. Okay, great. Carly, are there any other questions in the chat that I may have missed? It's hard to follow sometimes.
Nicole from the National Patient Advocate Foundation typed her name in. Nicole, did you have a question? No. And then Shay from the Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities also typed her name in. Shay, did you have a question?
I did, but it's just, could you restate the name of the committee that we should, or the meeting that we should attend to make public comment?
The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And I see that, Catherine, we can type it in, and we can also share that when we send the feedback as well. So that's the committee. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has an independent committee made up of scientific and medical experts. And they're called the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They typically meet 3 times a year to talk about vaccines. They look at all kinds of data. They make recommendations on flu, of course, every year, but they also make changes to current vaccines. There may be, for instance, they changed the shingles vaccination recommendation when a better, more effective vaccine was created. And so they're constantly looking at the immunization schedule and making changes. They will be reviewing the COVID EUA, emergency use authorization, when it comes out, and they won't be recommending because they don't need to. It's under emergency use authorization. However, they're really focusing on the priority of who should get vaccinated when. You know, we only will have possibly 40 million vaccines to start with. How do you prioritize to make sure it has the greatest impact to eliminate this this COVID pandemic that we're dealing with? So they'll be moving with their phases as we in the coming weeks. Are there any other questions, Carly, that you saw?
There's another one from Silvia. Silvia, do you want to ask your other question?
Sure, thank you. I'm wondering if there will be an assessment, a coordinated assessment among the 3 vaccines, looking at their efficacy, their side effect data, how they must be administered and the conditions under which they must be kept, etc., to figure out whether a particular vaccine works better for certain people groups, such as those in remote areas of Alaska, or those who can't stand in line, or be in group vaccination situations. I think it's very hard for a layperson to assess something like that.
So
Yeah,
this
great
is-
question, Peter.
Yeah, this is great. That is a really great question. And in fact, that is precisely why we can't just like, it can't be kind of in by 9, out by 5 evaluation of an emergency use authorization, because we deliberately have to go through the data very carefully and look at all sorts of different demographic subgroups and how the different subgroups potentially interact with each other. Remember that there are, right, because there is the issue of age is one issue. There's various different other demographics that could interact with age. So we need to look at all of those things. And you're exactly right. There may be some vaccines that really will do very well in certain populations that may not do as well in other populations. So we will look to each of these vaccines to see about that. You know, we're lucky these first 2 vaccines out of the gate, if everything holds up, look like they were doing, at least to a first approximation, according to what the manufacturers report, they look like they were doing reasonably well across the board, and we'll hope that pans out. But we'll look to see essentially at all the nooks and crannies of the data to see if there's a particular population that benefits especially well, or ones that might benefit less well that you might want to consider an alternative. Great question.
Dr. Errol Alden, who is a member of Vaccinate Your Family Board and the former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Dr. Alden, would you like to ask your question? Otherwise, I can read it.
Yes, I just thank you for your discussion about how children will be involved. Could you discuss also how pregnant women will be considered?
Well, so, Commissioner, I'll try to just take that one if that's okay.
You bet.
This is actually a really great question, and actually they'll be involved in 2 ways. We're going to get some data right up front now, because very deliberately in this particular clinical trial, there were no efforts to have women use contraception who were in the trials. There was, however, a pregnancy registry put in place. So we will have data from women who became pregnant during this trial, which is actually very nice, because it means we'll have data starting in trimester 1 on with people who have received the vaccine. So there we have those data, which will help us have some confidence as we move forward. But also we have made it known to the vaccine manufacturers that we will expect trials to be done in pregnant women. Obviously with vaccines where we don't have concerns at this time, and since none of this first cohort of vaccines are live viral vectors, there's not a concern. Although I will tell you, just so that we've learned from experience, you know, the Ebola vaccine was a live viral vector, and it turned out to be safe in pregnancy as well. So we will obviously, it's a very important group of people to make sure we understand, and it's up with it's actually it's very funny, the same words when we're talking about pediatrics, it's pediatrics and pregnant women is often the conversations we're having with the vaccine manufacturers.
Another question I have is the issue of the fact that some states have announced that they will be doing their own safety and efficacy reviews after the emergency use authorization has been announced. Does the FDA have a stance to combat that? What are your opinions on that issue?
So, Amy, thanks for the question. We obviously have absolute and 100% confidence in the expertise of the FDA and our career scientists. Dr. Marks's group has been doing this for years. We have an incredible track record. We are looked upon and respected around the world for what we do. And so I think we are very confident in the independence of our review, as well as the rigor and integrity of that review. That being said, there may be some states that choose to do this. We, of course, want to be transparent about the criteria used in the process, and we'll provide all publicly available information to everyone who wants it, including those groups. But I think it's important to remember, one, that once we make a decision, speed is important in terms of getting this vaccine to people, particularly those who are most at risk for significant morbidity and mortality from the disease. And so we certainly don't want any steps to take place that interfere with that speed. And I think the second thing is, in addition to the expertise of our scientists, we have access to information that others do not, that is very impactful upon these decisions. Again, we're willing to work with anyone as we move forward. We just have to make sure that we use publicly available information as opposed to confidential commercial information.
And I think some groups in the state level are looking at more of, was the process followed? And I know that Vaccinate Your Family and many of our partners were out there early on saying that we wanted to see the process go as it normally does, through the VRBPAC committee, in a transparent manner, and so we're seeing those steps take place now. But we were one of the ones out on the road, really making sure that was known, that we wanted to see that happen. I do have a question also. Dr. Marks also mentioned that the data, you can answer though, Dr. Hahn, the data would be coming into the VRBPAC committee now that you're seeing all the clinical data. Will that data also be available to the public, either in the future or as the VRBPAC is meeting?
Yeah, Dr. Marks, you might want to comment on that. You've been very clear about whatever materials are provided and publicly available for VRBPAC, that are available for VRBPAC that don't contain confidential commercial information, we will make available on our website. But Peter, you might want to be more specific.
Right, that's exactly correct, Commissioner. So basically, summary tables, data on tables of adverse events, all of the kind of the high level information will be made available on the web as we post our briefing documents and as the company posts theirs. There'll probably also be any supplementary slides from the presentations at the advisory committee meeting will be posted as well. We will not be making available confidential information such as the individual patient level data that we receive. And that's because it is confidential information. And we just don't want to, we can't take the chance of de-identifying data, et cetera, that the data are not fully de-identified and someone gets identified. So I think though that people, when they see.
Dr. Marks, you just muted yourself.
I think when people see what's available on the web, I think they'll be comfortable that we've been transparent.
Okay.
Remember that many other regulatory authorities around the globe don't actually, we actually look at the individual patient level data, whereas many regulatories around the globe don't even look at that. They'll look at the summary tables like the ones that we'll be posting. So when one looks at what other regulatory authorities around the globe will post, it will probably look very much like what we will.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Marks. Well, Dr. Hahn, I wanted to give you the last word here. We have about 4 minutes. I wanted to thank you, truly. Please give your staff a thank you from all of us in the vaccine community. We know that you're working night and day. So as we're moving towards Thanksgiving, we are definitely grateful as a nation. But can you please give some final remarks, and then we'll send everybody on their way.
Yeah, for sure, Amy. First of all, thanks to Vaccinate Your Family, you personally. It's been a great partnership, as well as everyone who's participated in this Zoom call. We have 17,000 plus incredible career staff and scientists. They have worked tirelessly during this pandemic, and Dr. Marks has led an amazing group with a really remarkable expertise. Our commitment to the American people is to use data and science to make our decisions. Politics will not interfere or enter into any of our decisions. You have that commitment from me. You have that commitment from Dr. Marks. We can't prejudge what's going to happen to these applications. And although we want to do this expeditiously, we are not going to cut any corners. We are going to do this and apply our rigorous standards. So I want you to know that we haven't wavered from that. Amy, your comments about previously having concerns that the processes and principles would be followed, we are in fact following those. hold us to that. We want to be held accountable to that, but we will do that. And we hope that that will provide a great deal of confidence about this vaccine if in fact it is authorized. Just thanks to everyone, and stay tuned, and we hope to have more of these conversations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hahn, Dr. Marks, Rear Admiral Araujo. We look forward to the coming months, and I want to thank all the patient advocacy groups. You're doing amazing work. If you have more questions, you can always email me. It's amy@vaccinateyourfamily.org. We're happy to send them over to our partners at the FDA. And have a wonderful Thanksgiving and please be safe, wear your mask, and only have your immediate family over. Thank you very much.
Thank you.